Welcome back to a brand new episode of the MMA Beat. It is Thursday, August 25th, 2016. Hello again, everyone. I'm Ariel Helwani, back inside our New York City studio. As you can see, we are rolling 3 deep this week. The man in the hat over in Vancouver, British Columbia. He'll be covering UFC on Fox 21 for us, so stay tuned for that coverage. But of course, we have to have a show this week. Much to discuss, so let us get right into it. That, of course, is Luke Thomas of SiriusXM and MMAfighting.com, and that is the man in the shirt, Jeff Wagenheim of the Washington Post. All right, guys. Of course, aftermath of UFC 202. There's a lot to discuss there. But first, let's start with the new news of the week, so to speak, and that's Rory MacDonald headed to Bellator MMA. We have been talking about his free agent status for quite some time, and I was very excited about that fight against Wonderboy Thompson in June. Of course, he lost that fight, but yesterday, news breaks that he's headed to Bellator. How big is this news?
Big. It's big. I think it doesn't feel quite as monumental as it could have been. I think, if you...
Because he's coming off the loss?
Yeah, like one of the interesting components...
2 in a row.
Yeah, two in a row. Now, one of those... Well, in many ways, both of those were forgivable losses. One especially forgivable. The one against Lawler was an incredible performance. One of those sort of things where there's no loser, but I mean, there is. But for me, it's like, look, did they get him? They didn't get a guy who just came off an incredible performance or an incredible win streak. They got an incredible guy at a bit of a fairly mid to low point in his development, but I think they got him at a point where he needed a break, he needed a change, he needed a refreshment, as it were, he needed a lateral move, and so I think it's big for Bellator. It's not monumental for either organization, and it could potentially have major ramifications for that division or other free agents who want to follow, but it is definitely an important acquisition for Bellator. It's just not really world-changing.
Yeah, I agree that that with your enthusiasm yet tempered down a little bit. I think that the 2 losses in a row does put Rory in a kind of a strange spot, because think about that. Even really right going to that Lawler fight, he was the guy. People were looking at him. It was like he was ready to take over that division in a lot of people's minds, and didn't quite get there in that fight. And then the next thing, he goes out there and he's facing the guy who a lot of people were now saying, this is the guy who's gonna take over this division in Wonderboy. And Wonderboy, I thought handled him pretty well. And so Rory has, as you said, a bit of a downside, but he is still Rory MacDonald. He's still a young guy, and we'll see whether he is sort of losing a little bit because of having 2 straight losses, or if it's just a matter of he's fought 2 guys who are just amazing, and he's gonna go over to Bellator and be everything that we've always expected him to be.
It's This is a signing about, let's see what we can do with this guy, because there's some potential that we can, there's some magic we can recreate with him, and there are some services we can provide to him. This is not, we just got the biggest free agent off the best, like it's not like Yankees signing Bryce Harper after last season, right? NL MVP. That's not what this is, but it still is big.
Are you surprised? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and it's also a different kind of signing than, a lot of the Bellator signings have, over the last bunch of years, have been like older fighters past their sell-by date, and this is a changing of that direction. Not specifically this one. The direction has been changed already. We see this guy. We see Ben Henderson, who's fighting who's fighting this weekend. Matt Mitrione is another guy. Phil Davis. I mean, there's been several people, and it just filters out to the point where that the fighter roster has become, I think, more interesting, and it's not that they just have those kind of big attraction freak show fights that they were doing for a while with the Titos and the Ken Shamrocks and all that stuff.
UFC confirmed yesterday that they did not match the offer, so there's no bidding war here. Are you surprised that they didn't match it?
No, I mean, it depends on what the offer was.
Yeah,
I mean, did they not know? Right? Did they not bid just to be spiteful, or or was it a calculated attempt on their part to allow Bellator to overpay for a guy? Really, kind of hard to say. I don't know without knowing the specifics, but. I know that, look, this is one of the situations where I would be, a lot of the times I like to bang fans over the head with a gavel, but in this particular case I wouldn't. I think fans are allowed to have, and should be encouraged to have, some mixed feelings about this, right? Like, It's a different situation. They're not related, but it is sort of a weird moment in time that UFC welterweight CM Punk is debuting at 203 and Rory's not on the roster. It just doesn't feel all that normal. But at the same time, there's a lot of winners here, man. Look, there's not a lot of good fights for him in Bellator, admittedly. I think it's a reason to have some tempered skepticism.
But wouldn't you say welterweight is probably their most interesting division right now?
Right, because you've got Paul Daly, you've got Douglas Lima, you've got Koreshkov. Those are 3 fights right there that would be, I mean, that maybe he mows through them in a year or something, I don't know. But you at least can have
MVP coming up the ranks.
So there's some real possibility there for him. And I feel like, look, man, the guy is now a dad. The guy had a rough go of it in 2016. He wasn't fighting losers, and he took a beating in that Lawler fight. Look what they did for Michael Chandler when he was down 0-3 in 3 fights. They built him back up. Coker is very, very good at taking guys who are a little bit damaged and bringing them back to life. And I feel like that's exactly what he needed.
Let me ask you this. Which signing feels bigger in your opinion? Which is more significant, the Benson Henderson signing or the Rory MacDonald signing?
I think Rory MacDonald, because he is still a young guy who
just 26.
Who's I mean, I always think of him as a kid. I mean, he's my son's favorite fighter, and
really,
and I think that happened because when my son started watching MMA, Rory was just past 20. I mean, he was what, 21 or something when he started?
He actually, his UFC debut, his MMA debut came when he was 16.
Right.
So it's interesting to know that he's 26, but he has
27.
He's 27, but 10 years under his belt, 11 years under his belt, right?
So it's almost the best of both worlds. He's built up a career because we have seen him for years and years and years, and yet he's not he's still got a lot of years left. So I would say that is a more interesting sign. Now, of course, the Henderson's thing comes with, this is a former champion, so that's certainly a big thing too. But and I think maybe I'm a little bit tainted by the fact that we've already seen Ben Henderson debut and lose in his debut with Bellator. So maybe that's part of what's changing my mind about it. But at this point, I look at this as a bigger signing.
What do you think is bigger?
Ooh, well, there is something to be said for the fact that when you sign Ben Henderson, you got a former champion. But really, I think they're roughly equivalent in different ways. Neither of these guys, I was thinking, what's one there's a number of benefits. What is one benefit if you're Bellator in signing Rory MacDonald? Said you've got a guy that I wouldn't call him a media darling, but like Benson Henderson, this is a guy that MMA media knows and cares about and follows.
Yeah.
And so he brings a level of coverage that they ordinarily would not get in that regard. But we all have to make some presumptions about Rory that I feel like I don't really feel like he made this move by accident, even if UFC declined. I mean, if he really wanted to be with the UFC, I think they would have found a way. People to your point, he started fighting when he was 16. We've seen what happens when guys get into MMA earlier, they exit a lot earlier. And
I was going to ask you about that.
And I wonder if he was if he kept getting put through the ringer in the UFC, would he really make it to 30? Maybe. I'm not saying he wouldn't, but it's an open question. I feel like with Bellator, he's got a chance to really extend his career with the appropriate kind of matchmaking. And to your point about Henderson or MacDonald, which one's bigger, I kind of feel like each one builds on the other.
Yeah.
Once a Davis goes, then maybe a Mitrione and a Henderson start saying maybe we can go. When a Henderson goes, who's a former champion, then maybe a MacDonald goes. And I'm not saying this will cascade into an avalanche of guys going, but each one has this effect of enticing other guys in similar positions.
And also, to build off that point, if you're asking which signing is bigger, maybe the answer is that both signings together is that's the real story here, because this is not a matter of just cherry picking one guy and saying, okay, we're going to put all the resources into this one guy and bring him over and he's going to be the big star of our company. No, they're starting to find people in the UFC, recognizable names, fighters who are relevant still. And the more that they can do that, I mean, I don't expect that this is going to put Bellator on equal footing with the UFC. I think that's, that ship has sailed. I think that that's not happening. But I think that it's a relevant organization that becomes more relevant. The more recognizable fighters and fighters who are players who would still be considered contenders if they were still in the UFC.
And Bellator wants to go back to Canada. Now you got a headliner.
Well, so this is my point as to why it's a bigger signing than Benson Henderson, because let's just say you take Benson Henderson to the most ideal city location possible for him. I don't know,
Phoenix?
Glendale. He's not originally from there, but that's his home now,
Yeah.
MMA Lab. Does he sell out that arena where the Arizona Coyotes play? Probably not. But you could take Rory MacDonald to Canada, and they have no Canadian stars, and we know that the Canadian market can be a very successful one, especially if GSP comes back. There's going to be a buildup of interest in the sport in general. I saw yesterday the news that he was going to Bellator was picked up by all of the major sports outlets in Canada, like the TSNs of the world, the Sportsnets of the world. So you could take him to Vancouver, which is where he's from. He's shown that he can sell out the arena in Halifax. The Ottawa card did very well. He trains out of Montreal. I think that this could be their ticket to the Canadian market. Now they've held they've held events in Canada before, Casino-Rama, but with the Chris Hordeskis of the world, I think Rory MacDonald could do legitimate good business for
Ben
them.
Askren.
And Ben, yeah, that's right. They could. I mean, I think strategically, from a business standpoint, once you peel back the layers, I think this makes a lot of sense for Bellator, given where Canadian MMA is right now. If GSP is on the sidelines, he's the most famous Canadian athlete fighting in MMA, right?
Yep.
There's no doubt about it.
Sure.
And hopefully,
What about Brock Lesnar?
yeah,
Right.
good one. Based off.
Well, people, to your point, people say the Canadian market is down, and maybe it is, but my interactions with Canadian fans always tells me the Canadian market might be down, but it's also hungry.
It's coming back. Look, TKO is back.
Yep.
TKO, Stephen Patry, they're on Fight Pass. The potential return of GSP. They're in Vancouver this weekend, which I think is a weird card, and I wouldn't put too much stock in it. There's no real great Canadian athletes on it. But they're going back to Toronto finally for a pay-per-view later on this year in December. So I feel like it was down, and now we're going to start to see the comeback, especially with GSP spearheading it.
Yeah, and having guys like, for example, look at the Bellator show in the UK,
Yeah.
right? I mean, did it sell out? No, not necessarily, but it was a big venue, O2, and you talked to all the MMA journalists who were there. They were like, look, was it the most rousing success? No, but it was a pretty good first step for Bellator, all things considered, with the weird TV situation that they had with all the different channels. The Canadian market is already much more, the wheels are already greased a little bit. Coker doesn't have nearly as much work to do to get things going there. And with Rory MacDonald, and again, look, the Canadian fans know MMA. You could put Douglas Lima against them, and I think that would do pretty well, I
still feel like Rory MacDonald as a personality has been undersold. He's underappreciated. This guy, I mean, I know he's reluctant to go with the Canadian Psycho moniker, and maybe that's to his own benefit. Like, maybe that makes it even better. But the guy, if you get to know him and are comfortable around him, he's a fantastic interview because he's so brutally honest. Again, I am reminded of him saying the best day of his life, perhaps before he became a father, was the night he fought Robbie Lawler and had his face rearranged. That was the best day of his life. He's a little different. Yeah. The guy goes by the beat of his own drum. So I still feel like there's something there. Now, let me ask you about this. We can't forget that he was winning that fight against Robbie. And, of course, the damage to his face, 5th round, we saw what happened. It's one of the most memorable scenes inside the octagon. But then he was outclassed by Wonderboy. It just wasn't his night.
Right.
And Wonderboy is a fantastic fighter. I think a lot of us think he might become a champion at some point, very soon maybe. Do you see a decline in his skills? Like, are they kind of catching him at the wrong point? 2 years ago would have been better when it seemed like he was destined to become a champion. Are you sensing that this might be sort of his last run, even though he's relatively young?
There's certainly the potential for that to be there. There's no question. If you look at the evidence the way you laid it out just now, there's certainly that. You can certainly interpret things that way and wouldn't be wrong. The way I looked at it was different. I thought that that one of the reasons he was kind of outclassed by Wonderboy was that he was still feeling the effects of Lawler. I mean, I always got the sense in that fight that against Wonderboy you can't fight at distance. You have to get inside his distance. And I got the feeling that there was something that was preventing him from pulling the trigger and getting inside. And it might have been the muscle memory or just the brain memory of getting beaten up like that. And that might have been, that's sort of how I looked at it.
And remember that nose condition he has. Like, I forget who I spoke to. Maybe it was Joe Lozon. I can't remember who it was, but some fighter I spoke to, I remember them telling me distinctly like they had a problem similar to that one. And the only solution was the doctor was like, you just need to take a year off.
Yeah.
How viable is that? I don't know. In Bellator, look, maybe, it's not like those guys there can't punch him in the face as well, but there's certainly, if they give him like maybe the first or two matches aren't necessarily against the very top guys, get him a chance to get his feet under him. This means he can have camps, make money, and be at least less risk of exacerbating these existing conditions. And I think not only is that good for him physically, but I think mentally that can really turn him around. He just seemed to me not in that fight against Wonderboy. That just did. I'm not saying Wonderboy wouldn't beat the very best Rory MacDonald, but I'm pretty convinced that wasn't the best Rory MacDonald.
And maybe all the other stuff going on behind the scenes played a factor into that. Now, let me ask you, Tyron Woodley is the current UFC welterweight champion.
Yes.
Rory MacDonald's last great victory was against Tyron Woodley in Vancouver, UFC 174. Do you think this raises his stock? Now they can say, look, we beat the guy, we signed the guy who beat the guy not that long ago, 2 years ago.
I don't know. I mean, people are already kind of down on Woodley, aren't they? It's not like would the UFC even rush to defend against that accusation? I don't know that they would.
But this is maybe something that Bellator can say.
Yeah, I mean, they could say, I mean, look, but they have Michael Chandler who beat Eddie Alvarez too, you know. No, Eddie got his revenge, of course, but in the end, those are just sort of like inside the bubble talking points. You know?
Okay.
Yeah, you can make a case for anybody being better than anybody else if you sort of do enough of the math and put enough names in between.
But I feel confident.
Coker still tweets when like a Strikeforce guy wins
Sure,
the title.
he loves that.
It's like, who's winning? Strikeforce? No, UFC is winning.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
I still feel like you can confidently argue that he's top 5 best welterweights in the world?
Sure.
Yeah.
And how often can Bellator claim that, you know?
Right.
In how many divisions? Not that many.
and a guy fans like him.
Yeah.
I don't think he's
I
a
think
major star.
the
but-
reaction was very positive yesterday. The reaction was a mix
I
of...
got a lot of negativity.
Well, I got, and I want to hear what you say, but I got a lot of, at UFC, at Dana White, how can you let him go?
Right.
I got a lot of, wow, good for Rory that he's, hopefully getting paid. Interesting move by Bellator, now I'm going to have to watch some more. But I didn't get a lot of, like, he's a bum, F you. Did you get a lot of that?
No, I didn't get that he's a bum. I got the disappointment, like, how could UFC let him go?
But that speaks, at the end of the day, that's a nod to Bellator and Rory.
Yes, but that was also combined with what a stupid move. I don't want to see him
On
fighting
Rory's
when
part?
Sometimes it wasn't really
Yeah,
clarified.
that's right.
I don't know how much this was given.
People who respond to you are not always clear in their.
Oh, they're clear donks. But yeah, I mean, there was a level of dissatisfaction that this was somehow either the wrong career move for him or unfair to them. And so again, and I think if you're a fan of Rory MacDonald, you want to see him fight the best. I don't know that that's so wrong. I would just say take a step back. Let's see if we can there is a case to be made that this is for the long term the best. And again, he didn't sign with them for life.
Sure.
This contract will end too. You never know what the future holds.
And again, I will add, this is not like, I don't know, let's just say Cain Velasquez signing with Bellator to go to their heavyweight division, because let's be honest, there isn't much of a heavyweight division. Right. That's their most interesting division. I mean, I would love to see Koreshkov against Rory MacDonald. I'd love to see at some point MVP versus Rory MacDonald, Douglas Lima, Paul There are options there. Of course, it's not the creme de la creme.
Well, that's it.
But he's not just fighting bums.
There are really good fights ahead for him potentially.
Let's see Ben Askren, by the way.
But we just got finished saying that this guy is a top 5, top 5 in the world, and there's a natural feeling among fans, and I think it's understandable, and I sometimes feel that way myself, that the top guy should always be, the potential should be for all the top guys to possibly fight each other, and that potential is gone when it comes to Rory MacDonald for now.
You know what the great news here,
Well, hold
in
on,
my
though.
opinion is?
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
The great news is, to me, this signifies the sport is getting healthier. Because I feel like when something like this happens, this is good for all parties involved.
Yes.
It's good for the UFC because it says, look, we're not a monopoly. These guys can go and fight somewhere else. They can get paid pretty well to go fight somewhere else. It's good for Rory, who's getting paid, and maybe a change of scenery is good for him. And it's good for Bellator, who continues to be a player in the free agent game, and that drives the prices up. And so I feel like this, to me, is like, okay, this is the way the sport should be. Everyone should fight out their contract, see what you're worth, and then just make a decision. Yeah. No hard feelings. It's business. So I'm encouraged when I see things like this.
Again, though, that the scenario you laid out, though, doesn't take into account the fan interest in seeing all the fights.
BS. We were dealing with that world for 20 years, and the fighters were getting almost criminally underpaid.
Absolutely.
I don't care about that anymore. I want to see the fighters get paid.
I'm agreeing with you.
I don't want to live in this fantasy world where the best fighters fight the best fighters and get paid 20 and 20 to do it. They deserve to get paid, and if it means going to fight elsewhere,
also,
I'm all for that.
You were all like, oh, well, I mean, who could he fight? Oh, Douglas Lima, that'd be good. Maybe Ben Askren comes back. Unlikely, but whatever. If I were a fan of Rory MacDonald, I would be prepared for him to face a few bums, actually.
Build them up.
That's part of why you would go to Bellator.
Sure.
You can't fight bums the entire time. At some point, you're going to want to see that Douglas Lima or Paul Daly fight or whatever the case may be. This dude, I can't be clear about it. He's 27. He has a ton of miles, not merely from fights, from injuries as well, man. Jesus Christ, let's give him some easy fights for a couple times. Let him get back on his feet, you know?
Yeah, no, that is a great point. And perhaps they learned a lesson from the Benson Henderson situation, right? And you were saying we're just coming off seeing him lose, and maybe his return fight tomorrow night has a little less luster surrounding it. They put him in there at 170, not a natural weight class, against a guy who makes people look very bad. And maybe they learned a lesson there.
Yeah, well, I mean, we all thought that Benson Henderson was going to win, but to your point, maybe an overabundance of caution is justified. You know.
One last thing about free agency. Donald Cerrone said last week that he is going to be a free agent post 202, and amazingly, he now claims that he misspoke. His management says that he misspoke. The interesting thing is he said this on Thursday to us, and then he continued to talk about it on Saturday. In those 3 days, no one corrected him. That, to me, is the most amazing part of it. But would Cerrone be bigger than Rory?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah,
because he brings this fan base with him?
This dude just jumped up to welterweight and is starching elite contenders there. That is totally different. And the truth of it is, what if Cerrone went there like a refreshed MacDonald versus Cerrone? Ooh, that would be incredible. Or if they get Larkin and Larkin Cerrone, like all of those would be amazing. Or Larkin Cerrone in the UFC, whatever. You get the idea.
Yep.
But to your point, I mean, Cerrone is on a very, not just a rocket ship, a very surprising, almost out of nowhere rocket ship, and looks better than he did at lightweight. That is very different.
And also, you know, he's Cowboy. He's a character,
Right.
yeah, and we've learned, if nothing else, over the last year, couple of years, that it's not just whether you are a good fighter. You know, Frank Yeager's a really good fighter, but he's not really a character. Conor McGregor is a good fighter, and he's a larger-than-life character. And look who's the guy who's making the millions of dollars.
Right.
So, you know, Cowboy is a guy who is going to draw attention both with his fighting and also just being Cowboy.
Who would have thought after getting starched by RDA 8 months ago that he would be able to reinvent himself like this? The surprise isn't that he's fought 3 times since, is that he continues to look better every time out in a new weight class. This doesn't really happen all that often. That comment from Dana White that the thing that plagues him is that he's horribly inconsistent. Now it just seems even crazier. He's won 11 of his last 12. The one blemish is that loss to RDA.
Right. You bring it up every single time.
Well, I mean, it's because it's unfair to Cowboy Cerrone. The guy has the talk that he doesn't, you know, rise to the occasion on the big stage and win the big fight. That doesn't, you know. It's not computable anymore.
Yeah,
it doesn't apply to him anymore. Is the word I was looking for. Right?
It is kind of shocking that the UFC president would not actually be accurate in how he would assess one of the fighters.
Okay, so he fought at UFC 202. Let's transition to 202. So much to unpack here. Wow, what a night, right? And I almost feel like, and correct me if you guys feel differently, we enjoyed it more because it was everything 200 wasn't, right?
Sure.
It felt like this nice event that happened organically, and there wasn't a lot of drama. Yeah, there were some injuries here and there, but it wasn't rammed down our throats. They didn't try too hard. It was just everything we love about MMA. The build-up was fun. The aftermath was fun. The fights were. It just, I don't know. I left 200 almost depressed, and this was before the Jones. Actually, it was after Jones, before Brock. And the Jones thing, I think, took the wind out of a lot of our sails. And I left 202 almost, all right, I love this sport again. This was a great night. Do you know what I'm saying? Am I talking crazy?
No, I thought it was really great. I mean, it was there were all finishes on the main card except for the main event. And I mentioned this before a number of times, so I don't have to belabor the point, but like, first of all, so you get 4 finishes, great, you know, and then the co-main event. I mean, they got done with that right away, which was great because there was a good nice a good MMA card doesn't just have great fights; it has a flow,
True.
has a rhythm to it, and this one had a rhythm. And when you got to that main event, man, I've said this before, you know, you watch it. I'm not saying all boxing fights, but think of a great boxing fight that went to a decision in your mind, right? These things it's a story unfolding, it's a human drama. And sometimes MMA fights have that, sometimes they don't. This one, the main event, had all of
everything.
That. It was incredible. And one quick point about it, you know, I think 200 was death by overkill, right? There's something to be said for the fact that, you know, maybe you need some Mike Perry's versus Hung Gyu Lim's on a card, provided that once you begin to escalate up the main card, then you start bringing in all the elite guys, and then there's this crescendo feel to it. I feel like they got it exactly right. A little bit of luck, too, but it all worked out in the end.
Yeah, it was quite an amazing event, all told. But that main event, the ebb and flow of and the twists and turns and the just think of the changes, just purely the changes of momentum in that fight.
Yeah.
Just nothing else. Don't even think about anything else, and just that makes it spectacular. The only thing that was better than Saturday night for me was Sunday morning when I rewatched it, and then I saw things that I hadn't even been able to compute on Saturday night because there was so much going on in that fight that it was just really incredible. And in my mind, I've never seen Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor has never impressed me more than he did on Saturday night.
This was my next question, just to you. Has he earned your respect?
Oh, well, he's always had my respect. This is a false narrative.
No.
I've always, he's
I feel like people changed.
World's biggest Conor McGregor hater.
He's always had my respect. But I will say this: until then, I've always had some sort of question. There was always a what if, or yes, he's great, but there was always a little bit of something, and it was partly because he's always been kind of a front runner, a guy who's gone out there and just starched people. I mean, he had trouble with Chad Mendes the first round, but he was able to protect himself pretty well, even though he was on his back for most of it. But this is a fight where he had to dig deep in a way that I've never seen him have to do. And it was also a fight where right from the first exchange, you knew that he was prepared differently, and he won that fight with his brain. He won that fight by sticking to a game plan, and he wasn't flashy. He threw that one spinning kick, and I think Kavanaugh yelled at him for doing it.
He said that was not part of the game plan.
I mean, I thought it was the most brilliant performance I've ever seen by him, even though he won the fight by the thinnest of margins.
It was interesting to see him learn from his mistakes. Completely different fighter, even from the walkout. Like his demeanor was completely different throughout that entire fight.
And proof that El Chapo shtick was just total excess.
Yeah, and he went back to the old music. Like
Yep.
the whole thing was, and as Kavanaugh says, win or learn. So now here's the big question. That was a success. 5th greatest gate in UFC history. All told, it seems like the pay-per-view did very well. It seemed like there was a lot of interest, especially after the press conference chaos and all that. Should they run it back? Nate is campaigning for the immediate third fight. Should they run it back right away, or is that a mistake?
Just not immediately. I mean, that fight is an inevitability, and I feel like it's always in their back pocket, win or lose. If they're on a win streak, put them together. If they're both on losing streaks, you know what? Let's fix this. Let's get out of this rut. Let's find a way to make some. It is a moment where, like, we often talk about chemistry between fighters or between people as like we work together for a mutual end. And I suppose they're doing that too, but like we need to think about these guys. There might be rivals in some ways in the cage, enemies, or however you want to take seriously their opposition to one another, but they have unbelievable chemistry with each other. Mm-hmm. They not only bring out the best, they bring out the worst. They bring out the most bizarre from each other. It is so incredibly revealing. You don't need to do that in quick succession. They can take a break, and no matter what is happening in between, when they bring them back, they're going to be able to recapture that easily, quite easily. Now not only do they have chemistry now they've got history between them. So I don't know exactly what the right answer is between Conor's preferences of 145 or 155, and that's a separate conversation. They're going to fight a third time, but to me, it would be incredibly wasteful to do it right away.
What about you?
Yeah, I'm on this. I agree with everything Luke just said. I feel as though this is an inevitable trilogy fight, but let it steep. Let it steep in the water for a little bit. Let it brew. Let the narrative change a little bit. The next time McGregor steps in the cage, I know Dana White wants him to fight down to 145 against Aldo, and that's where I would love to see him fight. But I don't make that decision, and I don't think Dana White makes that decision either. I think that the guy who makes the decision is Conor McGregor, and he wants to add a different belt to his collection. And I would be really surprised if the next fight for McGregor isn't against Eddie Alvarez at 155 for the belt.
So do you find it interesting that almost at the same time that Conor's talking about, I have options, this, that, he says shit is about to hit the fan. What a cliffhanger that was. Right. The last thing he says at the press conference is, I have a feeling shit is about to hit the fan, and then he walks off. I mean, that is just amazing theater. At the same time, Dana White is somewhere else in the arena talking about if he doesn't go down to 145, he's going to get stripped. Mm-hmm. There is this constant tension brewing between them. We saw it sort of boil over at the press conference when Dana starts without him. Do you firmly believe that they won't be able to convince him to go down to 145? And do you even think they care about the 145 title situation? It's just their way of trying to say, look, at the end of the day, the buck stops here, as opposed to what you think, where you think it stops, which is with you. We're the ones calling the shot. Because it seems like they're just continuing to have this tug of war between each other.
Look, we know that Conor McGregor can cut back down to 145 if he has to. But you saw him when he stepped on the scale and when he stepped into the cage against Diaz, fighting at 168 pounds.
Yeah.
He looked healthy, he looked strong, he looked good. There's no reason for him to have to go down and look like a skeleton like he does when he weighs in at 145. It's not healthy for him. That's A. B, if you're Conor McGregor, why would you want to step back in the cage with Jose Aldo? You beat the guy in 13 seconds. There's nothing you could possibly do to make it better than that. Are you going to beat him in 12 seconds? I mean, if you take a decision against Aldo, then you've backtracked. From McGregor's perspective, there's no reason to step in there and do that again. At least not now. You know, I think that I think he's not going to want to go back down there and do that, and I don't have any problem with that because I don't think that he should keep the belt, but I don't think that a guy should be made to cut weight. Just like this whole thing we talked about with Cyborg fighting, I don't think that a fighter should have.
If his next fight is at 155, the UFC should strip him.
Well, I think it's going to be interesting because I think they have to, but on the other hand, they could promote it as a super fight, champion versus champion.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, are they gonna strip him and then suddenly it's champion versus guy who just got stripped of a belt? It's kind of an interesting promotional thing. So I mean, I think ultimately Aldo and Holloway are gonna have to fight to win that, to take that belt. But I'll be interested to see whether they don't actually take the belt away until after, or they do something so that they can still promote it as a champion versus champion thing.
Okay, so you wouldn't book the trilogy fight?
Not right away, no.
What will you do with McGregor next?
Boy, that is a tough one.
Yeah, right?
It's a really tough one because I'm partially sympathetic to both sides here on this one, quite frankly. Like, if you're the UFC, what are you going to do? You're going to let this guy just have free reign? I mean, you can't, right? On some level,
but when he does have free reign, he makes them a lot of money.
When he doesn't have free reign, he makes them a lot of money.
True.
And remember, we talked about before, when they removed him from 200, we were like, why would you cut off your nose to spite your face? Because to them, what is the tax they have to pay to keep control over these guys, from McGregor all the way down to Tae Hyung Bang? That's the tax they're willing to pay. When McGregor,
curious that you chose Bang as your other end of these. I don't know, why him? Like, how does that guy come?
Just I mean, whoever, just some donk
of all the
on the roster. But the point being is, they're willing to do that. They're willing to just eat it. And he was like, why would they do that to their division? Why would they ruin it by having a guy, now they'll just strip me and make him champion?
Right.
Yeah, they'll do that, dude. They'll absolutely do that. Because that will then be saying to you, you don't run things, we run things. It will be very costly to them. But what would be more costly was just, all right, well, we'll let you leverage us. But I don't exactly know. My preference would be 155.
Title fight?
Sure, why not?
What do you say to Khabib Nurmagomedov, who's undefeated?
You're next, guarantee him a spot, whatever. Or don't give it to him. Give it to Khabib. I wouldn't. I'm not clamoring for it.
Okay.
I'm simply saying if they made it, I wouldn't raise major objections to it. The only objection I had, and I mentioned this on my live chat yesterday, was everyone's like, oh, there's really nothing for him left at featherweight. I'm sorry, pardon? What did you say? You mean a guy who has 0 title defenses has nothing to prove at featherweight? I don't buy that at all.
Although there is a case to be made that he actually beat a lot of the top guys on his way up.
What does that got to do with anything? So did John Jones.
Okay,
that's got nothing to do with holding a title.
So what are the fresh matchups for him at
First of all,
featherweight?
if anyone thinks the second fight with Nate Diaz was different.
Sure.
You mean to tell me Max Holloway wouldn't give him a different fight? Max Holloway was the only fighter before this one who took him to the 3rd round.
Fresh matchups, though.
This is a fresh matchup. You mean like somebody hasn't fought before?
Yeah.
Give Frankie Edgar another run through the grinder.
Yeah.
If you're going to give Conor McGregor, who has no fights at lightweight, a title shot, Frankie Edgar can't get one off a loss?
No, but I mean, Aldo would blow his brains out if that happened.
Aldo would blow Edgar's.
His own brains. If he gets jumped over.
I'm simply saying, if you're going, winning a UFC title is extremely difficult.
Yeah.
Maintaining it is another level of difficulty above that. Guys adapt, they get better. You have to hold position. The idea that we estimate McGregor's chances to be so great, therefore we don't have to fight. That's a cost to never have any fight ever.
Right.
I agree with you that the idea that he's cleaned out the division is a faulty term. I do think, though, that his place to be now is at 155. But I also think that he will meet Jose Aldo again. I think that Jose Aldo, if Aldo can go in there and beat Max Holloway, assuming that's the fight they put together, and becomes the featherweight champion, and McGregor ends up going in there and beats Eddie Alvarez and becomes the lightweight champion, well, there's your super fight. Now you fight you two champion versus champion at 155. We've talked about Aldo maybe doing that anyway.
That's a good
so
point.
I would.
He's had weight cutting troubles too.
Okay, so what's the
But real quickly, the division of featherweight does not look awesome now. Fine, I admit it. But these divisions grow and change, and contenders come out of nowhere in the blink of an eye. The idea that he has nothing left there is comical.
Okay, which fight sells more if you're the UFC, right? The Aldo rematch, which there's that history there, 13 seconds, blah, 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 or the title versus title history-making stipulation. And Eddie has actually done a pretty good job of smack talking. I mean, I feel like there's heat there and it'll only get better. Which one do you think does better?
So if they made it, let's say, like for December or something?
Let's just say New York.
Ooh, probably the Eddie one, you know?
Because he's Philly? I mean, that card is selling out regardless.
Fair enough.
But pay-per-view, maybe.
I have to say, Eddie's not out there being quiet either.
No, he's good.
Eddie is out there running his mouth,
Yeah.
man. He was on your show a couple weeks ago. He was on mine this week, and he's
a good smack talker.
He's like, Conor McGregor's good for 8 or 9 minutes, and then he's trash. And I'm like, I don't know if he's trash, Eddie. But the point being is he's getting out there and selling it. And plus, you know, the Philly thing, and his fans travel, and champ versus champ, to your point.
Right.
Yeah, dude, that'd be big.
You think that's bigger than
And
Aldo?
he didn't lose to the guy in 13 seconds. I mean, I mean, Aldo is amazing. I'm not trying to deny that Jose Aldo is an amazing fighter, but when you have that as the most recent memory of these two guys together, you know, I think it becomes challenging to promote it. I mean, look. McGregor did a good job of promoting himself against Nate Diaz in a rematch of a fight where he was choked out in the second round, but he's Conor McGregor. I'm not sure that Jose Aldo is going to be able to lift that narrative up.
Okay, so the UFC has said that it looks like Ronda Rousey is not going to be ready to fight in New York, right? November 12th. I've heard the same. It seems like right now they're hopeful for December 30th. Let's just say she can't fight on that card. Do they need Conor for that debut show at MSG? I think it will probably sell regardless.
Yeah.
But do you need Conor or Ronda?
It doesn't have a big headliner. Jones is out, probably. Brock is just Brock. Ronda's out. Conor's out.
Weidman's not the champ.
You know? Bisping and Hendo are fighting. You know, that wouldn't be an amazing headliner, but it would work as something for them, right? It'd be good. I just don't mean it'd be this grandiose thing. They don't have a headliner. I don't really know what they're going to do.
Does it have to be Conor? Because they've said they're open to it. Like, if you look at what John Kavanaugh has said, it's possible. His foot isn't, you know, he's going to get cleared. People have looked at the 6-month thing.
Yeah.
You just need one doctor visit to
that's
raise
just a maximal projection. It's not.
He didn't break his foot. He didn't break his shin. The ankle injury is an old injury.
If he can do it, sure. But like, boy, if I was him, I would use that to exercise some leverage. Wouldn't you? I mean,
but do they need to move mountains?
You think he would actually use some business leverage? I mean, come on.
Listen to him after the fight. Like, maybe I'll go to a different sport. He's doing the McMahon thing.
Yeah.
Floyd Mayweather, he's bringing up now. I mean, it's amazing the stuff that he has going on. But my question is, do they need him? Like, I still think that card will sell regardless. But I feel like if you're going to come to New York, Madison Avenue, all that stuff, this is a big moment for the UFC and WME. Do they need him there? Because I kind of feel like they do.
Need is a strong word.
It certainly won't hurt.
Look, like, can you headline the first ever MSG show with Eddie versus Khabib? I guess you can. And for the market, it makes a lot of sense to have that fight there. But I don't know.
What if you had Eddie versus Khabib, and then you had on the same card Ian Jacek versus Kovalkiewicz?
Yeah.
That's
just big enough for MSG.
Here's what I would say. Each one by themselves, maybe not, but like UFC coming to New York, then you've got 2 titles on the line.
Yeah.
You're going to be drawing in this incredible, and I suspect, enthusiastic Polish fan base.
Sure.
I mean, Tomasz Adamek at the Prudential Center, they get rowdy up in there.
Yeah.
You know, so I think you'll get a little bit of that, and plus Eddie's fan base travels. Habib, he's got a big mouth too, in the best way.
And there's a big Russian population here.
I feel like that could work.
One more ingredient, though. All the things you just laid out.
What am I missing?
The other one ingredient is McGregor's there, sitting first row cage side, and he is just, you know, they've got cameras on him, and he's going to challenge the winner of that lightweight title fight.
Again, I think it does well. I think they'll obviously have Weidman on there. They want to have Edgar on there. I mean, a lot of these guys who are local heroes, if you will, are going to be on that card. I feel like you need McGregor. I really do, and I feel like.
I mean, who would dispute you that it would be a drastic improvement?
I feel like they need to do whatever they can
If the
to get him
UFC
on that
goes to the
card.
negotiating table and be like, we really need you to headline, he's gonna rake them over the coals, man. They have to go into a position where like, we can offer it to you, but if you don't take it, we'll
Well, it's
just roll
also
on.
from Conor's perspective too. He gets yanked off of UFC 200. That was this big landmark event, and had he been on that card and it did gangbusters of business, there always could have been that claim that, well, yeah, we had an amazing supporting cast. There was all these other things going on. It was 200. Of course, it was going to do well. Well, he ends up on 202, a card that there's no significance there. The significance was that he was on it, and it was, a rousing success. We'll see we'll see all the business numbers, we'll see the pay-per-view numbers and all that coming up, I'm sure, pretty shortly. But certainly what we've seen so far was a rousing success. So for him to either be in the Garden in New York, the big debut, he might take from this past experience that he wants to be on his own show. He wants to be like the show, not just be part of the bigger show.
But I feel like from the get-go, Conor has been very consistent with his thoughts. And even if you look at his Twitter profile picture, he's holding 2 UFC belts. He started this year saying, I want to be a dual champion. I want to be the first guy in UFC history to hold 2 belts. Now, it didn't happen because RDA got hurt. I feel like, to play off what you were saying, I feel like that's something that he really wants. And I feel like he's been talking about giving the Irish fans a fight closer to home. It doesn't look like he can fight.
Well, if he wants it, that's different.
Yeah.
The question is, what does he want?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
What I'm asking you is, do you have reason to suspect that is a big priority for him?
I think he has not wavered on that.
And then,
and look,
does it have to be then?
He has also said the Aldo fight doesn't motivate me. You know what I mean? I feel, and even Kavanaugh said on my show on Monday that if it was up to him, 155 title is his next fight. They're very clear with their motives if you actually kind of study or
well, they're
listen
clear,
to what
but then they're
saying.
like, maybe I'll go to another sport.
Yeah, well, that's
maybe I'll just take a sabbatical.
But that's all part of the engine that's going to be.
That's right.
We know McGregor's going to get what he wants. He's going to do what he wants to do, and part of what you just said is that's part of the convincing process, I guess, that the UFC has to hear.
Sure. Here's one thing that I'm fairly certain about. I feel like it's a pretty good bet that until he fights Conor McGregor again, we're not going to see Nate Diaz.
Oh, hell no.
This is a guy who is prepared to sit out a year. I mean, he was prepared to sit out a year when he was making 20 and 20.
Yeah.
He just made a few million in 2 fights.
20 grand, 20 million. He's going to be on the shelf.
Right?
Yeah.
I can't foresee any scenario in which they bring him back against anyone else.
No. Why would you? He doesn't. And dude took a beating. He got roughed up in that one. I'd be happy to see him sit out a year. Look, he's older. And his game kind of is what it is. He can sharpen it up. He can work on some strategic changes, fight over fight. But he basically has fully developed his skill set. And I think Conor McGregor is almost there, but not quite. But if you're at the level that Diaz is, where you're always in shape, even if you're not competing, you're teaching kids jiu-jitsu and you're running and you're doing triathlons. When they call you up, it's not a big sacrifice to get there and do a 6-week camp and be ready to rock, or 10 days, right?
Yeah.
So for him, with all that cash to sit on, makes perfect sense.
And with a fight, he's got a fight already. He's got the fight. He knows he's got the third fight with McGregor at some point. He knows because he wants it, and more importantly, McGregor wants it too. Because I know Conor comes out of that rematch with the feeling of sort of the upper hand in a sense, because he's won the most recent one. But when you look at it, he got choked out in the second round. That was the Diaz win. The McGregor win was a 5-round war that was razor thin. So I think that McGregor would certainly, he sees that this is the rivalry that really has energized the fans, and McGregor knows that this is another big money fight for him. So Diaz is going to get it at some point.
Are you surprised, Luke, at the attention Conor garners from the mainstream media? It really does feel like when he fights, it's a big deal.
Yeah, I am now.
It's crazy, right?
Even dumbass Skip Bayless is out there tweeting moronic things about it.
He was there.
He was. Oh, and he got booed, which was awesome.
Can I just say one thing about that?
Yeah.
You see Skip Bayless tweeting about it. You see Colin Cowherd with his hot takes. You see Cowherd's protege, if you will, this guy Nick Wright. You see all these people starting to talk, and to me, it's just so transparent. They all work for FS1.
Yeah, of course.
All of a sudden, you love the UFC. You wouldn't fart in the UFC's direction when you were working for ESPN, and now all of a sudden you're saying that boxing is dead. And I mean, it's just, it's so transparent. I don't like to take the bait, but it's a little much. I mean, guys, like let's make it a little less obvious what you're trying to do here, right?
It is true though, but like it's all related. Like, so you've got the Skip Baylesses out of the world, sharing their profoundly stupid fight wisdom. Okay, I don't care what they have to say, but they're talking about MMA, and like you look at around, like other fighters want to come out of retirement. MMA is just super hot right now. It's just on fire, and I don't think it's going to last. I think when the McGregors and the Rouseys leave,
is it solely because of him?
Not solely, but I think he's obviously a big. I'll be honest. Like as he got more popular, I sort of noticed more and more people talking about him.
Crazy.
I was very surprised.
Bill Simmons is like live tweeting the fight,
and he was like, "This is the greatest fight I've ever seen." Now, that's an exaggerated moment in the course of an emotional fight, but nevertheless,
it's significant.
He is a real deal. You have Cristiano Ronaldo posing off him on Instagram. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And when I follow Real Madrid sites, obviously. When Conor McGregor said at the workout, Ronaldo has a new deal, this made all the Madrid sites were like, Conor McGregor says Ronaldo's his deal. This was a huge thing that he did this. Like his level of celebrity and reach, I feel like it's weird to say this because he's so popular, but part of me feels like it kind of snuck up on me. One day, the Bill from Yahoo, Dan Wetzels, are like, they're not only talking about McGregor, they know a lot about him. It's kind of surprising.
Yeah, and to that point, I was standing in the hallway as they were leading us to that makeshift press conference room tent thingy that they have at the T-Mobile.
Just an abomination.
And no joke, Kanye West, who you don't see at every UFC event, is engaging in conversation with Dylan Dennis. And I asked Dylan Dennis afterwards, who's Conor's BJJ training partner. He's like, yeah, he knew who I was. Like, he was asking me questions about jiu-jitsu and stuff. Like, Kanye seemed very excited to talk to Dylan Dennis, who's wearing the black Championship McGregor shirt. Like, he was being a fan back there.
Wow.
That's crazy.
That's super crazy. And I saw Leonardo DiCaprio at UFC 200 getting beer near the media room.
Yeah.
And I was like, the previous celebrities that used to come to UFC events were like Rosie O'Donnell sends a tweet, or Anthony Sabato Jr. Hey, I love this fight tonight at #UFC on Fox or whatever. Now you've got DiCaprio and Kanye. Like, it's incredible.
What do you think? Are you surprised by the attention that he garners from the mainstream, not just our little bubble?
I don't know. I mean, things have happened that have kind of helped build that up.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember, we were sitting here maybe a year or so ago, and we were talking about who are the biggest stars in the sport, and back then the idea we had was, well, the guy who was going to sell the most pay-per-views was McGregor, but he's a huge star amongst MMA fans in that bubble. But you go outside the bubble to the culture at large, and it was all about Ronda Rousey. Basically, it was Ronda Rousey. It was almost nobody else but Ronda Rousey. But now he's kind of broken out of that bubble to the point where everybody knows who he is. I mean, I don't think that was the case too long ago. I mean, really. I mean, I always judge these. I judge these things by the people I see out in the world who are not big MMA fans, and they're just people who are big sports fans and will be watching a game or something, and someone will say, hey, but the thing I always get was, hey, what about this Ronda Rousey? She really, she for real? Now it's all about Conor McGregor, and those are the people who didn't give a damn about MMA and probably don't even now that much, but they just know who this guy is, and they're sort of getting into it.
My litmus is always, my two older brothers are huge sports fans, watch NBA, NFL, everything. When they start asking me about an MMA fighter, I know he has crossed over, and they're all about Conor McGregor, asking me, have you interviewed him before, and things like that.
Dude, my dentist asked me about him. My dentist.
Okay, how about this one? My grandfather, who's 86 years old, called me Sunday morning in a panic, asking me who won the fight. 86-year-old, Lebanese immigrant to Canada, broken English, calling me, needing to know right now who won that fight.
There's bet down.
There is an Irish bar in Georgetown in D.C. that never used to show MMA fights. They only started showing them and got the license to do it, which is expensive to do, because of Conor McGregor. You walk into it, I won't call it a cathedral to him. It's not quite like that, but like there are Conor McGregor posters all over the walls. I was like, I'd never go to Georgetown. I happened to be in there. I was like, what? This doesn't ever happen. They don't do that for any other fighter, including guys from DC.
The best part is he knows it.
Right.
He knows it.
Right.
He knows what he's done.
And also,
he calls himself the $4 billion man.
And also, it's something that he's created because of himself, and I say it that way because Rousey's phenomenon, a lot of it was driven by this is a woman in a sport that's all about that's a men's macho sport, and there's a woman who's going out there and kicking ass, and so if some other woman had come along and done what Ronda Rousey did, that would have been enough. But this guy here, we've seen other fighters go out there and be dominant in the same way that McGregor has been, but there's something about the way he carries himself and the realness of it. That just completely obliterates people.
Last thing about this, I made this argument before, and I probably said it before it was fully true, and even then it's probably not fully true, but it's more true now than it was before. I don't know what's going to happen with Rousey, and maybe when Pacquiao comes back against this incredibly uninspiring fight, you can have a different debate. Certainly Pacquiao means a lot to the Philippines in ways that no other athlete would. Obviously the Klitschko's are still popular in parts of Germany, biggest economy in Europe, so this is not. The point being is, at least in the United States and North America, I feel like the biggest combat stars, in terms of not merely who's doing the biggest numbers, but who ESPN is talking about. I can't remember the last time I saw ESPN go in on a fight, absent Mayweather Pacquiao, like they do for Conor McGregor or Ronda Rousey. These are much more celebrated and covered figures, and that polarity shift, or the I don't know how far it is, but that shifting of the polarity is something I just never imagined 3 or 4 years ago.
And to me, it proves once again that sometimes the way in which you conduct yourself post-loss is almost just as important as the way in which you conduct yourself post-victory, because I think Conor really, I think he gained a lot of fans. He came out there, took the loss like a pro, made no excuses, and look at the way Ronda handled her loss. She really hasn't returned, right? And I think a lot of people gained some respect for Conor after that. He said, give it back to me right away. Same stakes, same weight, same opponent. I want to do it right now. And, the saga of Ronda Rousey returning. Now, all losses aren't the same. Injuries different. I'm not taking, any liberties there with my statement here, but I do feel like sometimes if you handle the loss like a pro with class, it goes a long way.
Well, also,
it really does.
I just feel like the two are connected for me. I think one of the reasons why, to your point, the fourth round of that fight was so important was because you look at Conor McGregor's record, he only went to the third round one time prior to this, which was with Max Holloway. That means that you've seen him a lot, but you haven't seen a lot of him. You really haven't. And I feel like when his back is against the wall, and even when he really falls, he shows up to the press conference in a suit and answers all the questions. And when that fourth round came out, he went there and tried to give it his best, and he won in the end. Those were incredibly character revealing to me. He has a big mouth, of course, but it seems like an incredibly intelligent guy as well.
There's behind the scenes footage that the UFC put out of him in the locker room not being able to stand. He's about to get the crutches and he says, I want to go talk to the media. And they wanted him to go to the hospital, but he made it a point to come talk to the media. Want to ask you guys about Rumble Johnson and his big victory over Glover Teixeira. So he says afterwards, look, John Jones needs to sit back. I'm getting this title shot next and it's going to be against DC. DC says, I don't want to fight John Jones. He's being coddled. We need to stop, every time this guy's ready to return, just all bow down to him. So they are kind of working together to box out John Jones. What do you make of this?
I'm all for it.
You're all for it. Even if he does come back and is ready to return when DC is ready to fight again, you say go with Rumble.
I'm all for it. DC is clearly not dodging John Jones. He's been so much wanting to get redemption against Jones.
Johnson too?
Right. And so this is not about DC saying, well, trying to manipulate the situation so he doesn't have to fight John Jones, because who wants to step in there again with this guy? He escaped once from that Rumble. Rumble was just incredible the other night. And if I was DC, I think I would have probably gone for option C. It
says a lot about DC that he's clamoring to fight this guy again. He took a shot.
And so I'm all for it. I don't think that. I think Jones has kind of, he's got some. He's got some issues. Let's let him percolate a little on the sideline for a little bit. If he's ready to come back, give him a good fight again. But let's let him build himself back up there. I don't think you just put him right back in there.
Let's just call it what it is. People are sick of John Jones's shit. They're just sick of it. Like, you have one overlapping problem over the next. It's just like, so he's on suspension for the potential violation. Oh, and he went to court and got the probation violation not gone through. So he took the driving test, you know, and it's just you can't even tell where one scandal starts and one stops at this point.
And are they almost sick also of this rivalry? Like, do they need a break of the DC Jones
there's
thing?
probably something to that. But I mean, I think they'd be happy to see the fight again under better circumstances. But I just feel like Jones is just this cascading river of problems, and until he can put a dam up to stop it, I think folks are just like, ugh, okay, you know what, man, come back when you're ready, and not a minute before.
Even the UFC's brass. I mean, if he goes out there, if Jones goes out there and were to beat Cormier and regain his belt, those guys in the UFC are just going to be holding their breath, waiting for the next thing to happen. And it's kind of funny that he's a guy who's so dislikable, and you know, Rumble's a guy who very likable, and yet he's had problems in the past. He's had, you know, several domestic violence cases, you know, in his life, and yet you listen to the guy talk, you watch him perform, you see the way he acts. So it's kind of a, you know,
Humble Rumble.
There's something about that guy that you kind of like him despite yourself. You read about him, you read about all the horrible things that have happened in his past. You think you want to dislike the guy who does that kind of thing, or at least is accused of doing those kinds of things. And then you watch him perform, you listen to him, and you have a different opinion. I don't think the same thing happens with John Jones. John Jones, things happen to him, and then he comes up with some excuse about this or that, and then he goes to a press conference and he cries, and it just doesn't. You know, when someone goes to a press conference and cries, and you don't, like yourself, sort of get a little caught up emotionally, it tells you something.
Yeah, and I really hope that the UFC, if Jones somehow comes back sooner rather than later, I hope they don't try to book that DC rematch, because DC has said that John Jones brings out the worst in him, and I think there's a case to be made there. Shame on the UFC if they go right back to that well.
I don't think they will.
After what happened at 200, you can't do that to the guy.
I feel like there's a palpable sense. This, in the end, it's better for the fans if I think Johnson and DC move on.
But now Dana White's saying Rumble Jones. What is that?
Okay, but at least
that
you're
is
not making
perplexing.
Yeah,
what do you do to DC?
I would be okay with Rumble Jones.
No. I agree with you. Even if you took something unintentionally.
You wouldn't want to see Rumble Jones, really?
Even if you took something unintentionally, there needs to be consequences for your actions, and you need to build yourself back up. At this point, there needs to be one consequence for your action. You know what I mean? Like,
well, he's not getting a free ride. I mean, this dude has bungled so many life opportunities.
You can make the case that Rumble Jones is the most anticipated light heavyweight title fight or non-title fight out there. Like, I think people actually want to see that fight. I don't think when John Jones comes back, he's going to get booed. Look at DC. The guy is vociferously booed, right?
Yeah.
So my thing is, like, you can't give the people what they want, because that's what John wants. He wants that big fight. He probably wants DC too. What I would do is, if I'm being honest, this is what I would do. I would do DC Rumble, and if he wins, I would do Gustafsson Jones too upon coming back, because this is the way you build John Jones back up. You start tapping into that first fight, which in my opinion is the greatest fight in UFC history, certainly the greatest light heavyweight title fight of all time. So you can replay that. That's the old John. That's when people were loving him. That's a way of Gustafsson getting his fight back. Who knows if he'll ever get it in any other circumstance. I feel like that's the way you do it. You do those two. Gustafsson's fighting Jan Blachowicz in less than 2 weeks. If he wins that fight, that's what I would do. John Jones, and maybe even do it in Toronto if Jones can come back in time.
I'd be okay with that. I just don't think I don't think at this point it's like a foregone conclusion that Rumble could starch him. You know?
I also don't think it's a foregone conclusion that Jones is going to be back this year. I think they keep talking about this confidence that he's going to be back. I mean, they forget about who the NAC is.
Dude,
they have a say in this matter.
Can we talk about that for a second? Everyone's like, USADA's going to clear me. I'm like, I have issues with USADA, but they are scientifically literate.
Yeah.
You're talking about the NAC. The clown car of participants that should be the theme song of it.
That's the C in NAC. I think.
It's unbelievable. Like, to think you can predict what they're going to do?
Yeah.
Ooh, good luck.
Okay, there's another fight that I want to mention coming out of 202 before we go, because I am salivating, literally salivating, honestly. Like,
ringing a bell.
There's stuff coming out of my mouth when I think about Cody Garbrandt and Dominic Cruz. Do you guys share this?
It's a little bit odd that you said it that way.
Stuff like saliva.
Yeah, I understand that.
It's good.
I don't salivate over the idea of the names of, it's fine.
I love this fight.
To each his own.
I really love this fight. I love everything that Cody says about it. I love DC, Dominic Cruz. I love that they had this altercation that was sort of caught on video. It's fresh. Garbrandt is knocking people out. He talks great. He looks great. It's just fun. Yeah. I love this fight, right?
Poor TJ Dillashaw.
Yeah, poor TJ Dillashaw.
Because one of the true forgotten stories is how much better did TJ Dillashaw fight I want to say Renan Barão, but it's not.
Sun Tzu.
Sun Tzu
Yeah.
at 200 versus the previous time.
But he was completely overshadowed, right?
Overshadowed. But like, I went back and watched the first fight, and the second one, oh my God, it was a marked improvement, right? And Sun Tzu had his own layoffs. But the point being is, like, I understand that Dillashaw has a great case to get that fight, but you are talking about Cody Garbrandt, who is entering Earth's orbit like a burning comet.
Yeah.
And then you've got the Man of Steel, Dominic Cruz, ready to, like,
God.
I mean, it feels like two comic book characters about to clash. I feel like, I would not be mad at a Dillashaw fight, but for me, there's also this thing about all these champs are losing all the time. Cody Garbrandt is not the technical wizard that Dominic Cruz is, but boy, he will knuckle you into coffee grinds if you let him.
Also, you tap into that alpha male Dominic Cruz rivalry, which just fuels that fight.
You cannot lose. I mean, you take those three guys, and any permutation of that, any two of the three fighting each other, it's going to be great.
Don't you think there's more momentum behind Garbrandt Cruz than Dillashaw Cruz? Even though Dillashaw Cruz won was a fantastic fight.
There certainly is more momentum. That's the fight that has the most energy around it. But Dillashaw Cruz again.
Yeah.
Dillashaw versus Garbrandt. I mean,
oh my God, that's a great
former
fight too.
teammates. I mean, so any of those together, the belt is the only X factor. That's the only one guy has that. So I guess it has to be wrapped.
The thing about Cruz and Garbrandt though is like it's like the old kung fu movie. Like you slayed my master. Now he has to like rise up to the top of the hill to go fight the guy who is the guy. The old boss of the villains. And bulldozing Takeya Mizugaki like that. What? Maybe they give him one more fight. I don't know, but it's got a ton of magic to it.
Yeah, maybe the other fight, if they go with Dillashaw versus Cruz, maybe they do Garbrandt Caraway, which also has a ton of heat behind it as well. But I kind of feel like Caraway missed his chance there.
Yeah,
I mean, he deserves a big fight coming off the Aljamain win, but Garbrandt, like, they're not flashy when it comes to selling fights, but the intensity with which they speak is just. It's intoxicating. Like I could just listen to those two going back and forth, and it really feels like they really despise each other.
They're action fighters.
Yeah.
Cruz is a different kind of action fighter, but you wouldn't. You could get two guys like Cody Garbrandt and put them together, everyone would be happy. But I love the contrast of brute force versus technical wizardry, and how because one guy has to be perfect for him to win.
Right.
Incredible.
It'll never happen, and I don't blame Cruz for not wanting to do it. But could you imagine that fight at the new arena in Sacramento on Fox in December? Garbrandt, the now Sacramento resident, maybe alpha male's best chance at becoming a champion now, and all of the heat there. I mean, that would be amazing. Wouldn't that be a scene? Great stuff. Okay, very quick, very good weekend coming up in MMA. Bellator 160 Friday, Benson Henderson against Patricia Pitbull. You would think the winner is going to get a title shot there. In the 155-pound division, also Antonio McKee Jr., AJ, and how about Bubba Jenkins getting on the main card? Huh? Yep. That's exciting stuff against Georgi Karakhanyan. So it's a solid card.
Big
Joey
fight
Davis,
for him too.
Yeah. And UFC on Fox 21. Carlos Condit returning against Damian Maia. The return of Paige Van Zandt. Anthony Pettis making his featherweight debut.
Huge.
Completely flying under the radar. I tried to talk to him. He doesn't want to do interviews.
Good. He doesn't need to.
It really feels like an important moment. I know. An important moment in his career. Jim Miller, Joe Lozon. Of all those fights, and maybe one that I didn't mention, which is sticking out?
I'm usually one of the kinds of guys who likes to find the sleeper on the prelim card, but the prelim card for UFC on Fox is nubs. It's not good at all. So for me, not to belabor the point, I want to see how Paige Van Zandt looks coming off Dancing with the Stars.
Okay.
Been about 8 or 9 months since her loss, and I think that's a perfect time to get up there. Get that TV reality show experience, but still keep training and see what you can do. Tough fight against Beck Rawlings, who looked good against Saya Hohammer. I always mispronounce her name.
So that's your pick?
No, that's not my pick. My pick is definitely going to be Anthony Pettis.
Okay.
Right, because that's a really tough fight. Remember when Frankie Edgar went down to 145 and fought Charles Oliveira? He won, but it wasn't like he didn't just blow through him. It took a little bit for him to work, and so this is a really important test for him. I'm definitely looking to see that. And of course, Benson Henderson. If you lose to Patricio Freire, that would be what, the worst loss of your since Zuffa career? He has a lot to lose here as well.
Yeah, both those fights were on my radar. I mean, definitely the Pettis one was the one I was thinking about the most for this. I'm also very partial. I love watching Joe Lozon fight. I love watching Jim Miller fight. I know they already fought.
You're a Boston
and I
guy.
love watching those. Well, I'm a Jersey guy and a Boston guy. So it's like
both.
It's like the two places that I've lived my life. So I like those guys. I always loved. I love when they fought the first time. It was a really fun fight. I feel like Jim Miller has kind of he's a little closer to the end of the line, I think, than Lozon. So I think I would imagine Lozon's probably favored this time, even though he lost the first one. So I will definitely be watching that one. There's no question about it. But the main event on Saturday, I've always loved watching Demian Maia compete, and so this is no exception. Just being able to see him compete, and I'm not even mentioning the guy who's fighting, Carlos Condit. But I just always enjoy watching Maia. I mean, I like watching a guy who is. I know this is mixed martial arts, but I love when there's a guy who is, just like so supremely good at one of the disciplines, and just to see him try to utilize his abilities in the other disciplines in order to get the game into his office, and I just love watching him do that.
Demian Maia is MMA's knuckleballer. That's what it is. He's a knuckleballer.
The R.A. Dickey.
And can you hit him or can you not? We're going to see.
Right.
I still maintain. I feel like the move to 145 isn't good for Anthony Pettis, and I'm bothered by it.
Bothered? Why?
I don't like it. I don't think that he was having trouble at 155. I think he hit a rough patch. He was figuring things out. He was coming off a very bad loss to RDA, but I don't know. Just seeing pictures of him just feels too sunken in, and that's before the weigh-in. So we'll see. I agree. And I mean, this is a crossroads fight for him, in my opinion. And then Carlos Condit, who was hinting at retirement in January when I think he beat Robbie Lawler. How does he respond from that fight? He called Demian Maia very boring. Does Maia suck him in? And really, if Wonder Boy's getting the next title shot, I feel like the number one contender could come out of this fight. Mm-hmm. Maia, yes. I mean, certainly if Maia wins. I mean, Maia has done enough.
It's a crazy fight too, man. Like, because Maia's not going to sling with him.
Yeah.
He's just going to go to take him down and take for the back. So, like, it's crazy.
You take the 4 fights on Friday's Bellator card, the 4 fights on the UFC card. You have a fantastic card.
Yeah,
talk about it.
That'd be sick.
They're both very top heavy, but some good action.
I don't mind having it on 2 different nights. Right. I don't need to sit there for 6.5 hours and watch all one night. Yeah.
All right. It's a good weekend coming up, so definitely check those out. And of course, we'll have all the coverage you need over at MMAfighting.com. All right, that does it for us. Back next week, we'll talk about those cards. What's so funny?
I was like, can we vape now?
Oh yeah, we didn't even talk about that. I'm sorry,
I had so much to talk about.
You know what?
I don't vape, but I just want to point this out here at Vox Media. I have seen hipsters at their cubicles vaping.
Hipsters work here?
And I want
Get them out.
And I want to break a chair over their heads.
Jeff had a whole dissertation on the vape.
I was going to lecture about that.
But you know what? Maybe it's better that we just forget about it.
Probably.
Maybe
is.
USADA will forget about it too.
Oh, I'm sure they will.
All right, we are done. Hello to Chuck in BC. Hello to everyone who has watched today's show either live or after the fact. We certainly appreciate your time. Again, we're back next week, so mark that on your calendar. For now, we say goodbye. For Luke, Jeff, I'm Ariel. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the fights.